Welcome everybody, it's Unstoppable Stilezzi here, and I got a very special tutorial request from you all to do today. Two people in the past 2 days actually requested this build and how to do it, so I figured, you know what, I'm going to show you how to do it. It is the Egypt Fast Industrial build. A build that you have seen in just about every one of my gameplay streams, since I love to do it so much, because it takes a sieve that is actual hot trash with very little flexibility and makes it very menacing. Yeah, it's a build that's been around for almost a decade, almost as long as the mod has been playable, in fact. Over the years, devs have tried to delete it, annihilate it, whatever you want to call it, but it just still survives to this day. In a weaker form, mind you, but still viable. Now, in the old days, this build was doable in 1 versus 1s. But now that they've basically slowed down a lot of the processes, now you can only do it in team games. Ideally, 2 versus 2s and 3 versus 3s. So, I'm going to go over it right now with you, show you how to set it up. We're going to do it on fast mode, so you don't have to wait as long to see stuff. We're not going to use the speed always wins code because I want to be able to explain stuff to you while I'm sort of doing it and for the duration of this upload. So let's do that right now. I'm going to do it just against a random bot. I will put it on sandbox so the bot behaves just like what we would expect in a team game, right? Like a 2 versus 2. Because the principle is, for you to run this build, you cannot do it in a situation where you feel like you will be attacked immediately or be pressured. If you got a teammate who isn't the most reliable friend in terms of your defense, I would not do this build. So, first thing is first, you put your tradesmen onto the spice stall, villagers on hunts. Pasha should be on his empower ability like this. But if you do have a treasure near your base like this one, feel free to go grab it very quickly. Next, you're going to want to get your library caravan first, and then run this queue up of your Egyptian villagers next. Alright, so you put your tradesman on export, you get Pasha into his little staff ability here, then you queue up one library caravan, followed by villagers. The idea is to mostly focus on food at the start, just like you would any normal game. But we're going to be just doing the blue library text here. None of the red ones, none of the yellow ones. Alright, so we're just going to focus on food for now and sticking to blue library text for the whole start of the game. Right, and eventually you're probably going to run out of pop around 10, so queue up one Bedouin, but no more than that. Just get one Bedouin for now. One Bedouin is all you need. We'll make plenty of those later. Eventually, during this, you'll probably be able to afford Library Blue number 2, so please do that. And as soon as you can, take 3 vills, bring them to the coin mine, okay? Sometimes I do 3 or 4, depending on if there's any coin treasures there. We could actually put another one on there right now for safety, so we'll do that. And from there, we'll just make sure that we keep our villager queue from the town center caravan going at all times. Right? Because what we're going to do next is, and by the way, since I am on fast mode, I am kind of being a little bit slow and sluggish in this. The most important card to send first in your deck is going to be Trans-Saharan Trade. This will trickle you export and will give you enough export to keep up with your age up timings. If you do not send this card first, your age up timings will be severely off and you will lose in this build. You have to send this as your first card. After that, you're going to send 700 coin. This is so you have enough coin to last you for the rest of your library tech researches. Then, as soon as you can afford Alexandria Shipyard, ideally around the time that your 700 coin arrives, you're going to get Alexandria Shipyard, Library Blue number 3. And make sure you're being careful on the map and not being idle with your vills. If you notice that a hunt is gone, you have to move your vills down to it, and you have to move Pasha down to it as well, so he can keep empowering those villagers and improving their gather rates, right? So we'll just train a few more vills here. This is normally what you're going to do, so I'm going to try to demonstrate that as best as possible with the speedier time. And then, when you can afford your harbor lighthouse, your blue 4, get the blue 4. That's going to be the next best one to get. So we will get that right over here. Yep. And notice how this temple caravan will trickle you some experience points as well, since it is a church building. So that will be a nice little boost to help you later on in the game. So if you can try to keep that thing alive, keep it alive. It's going to be really helpful for you. Actually, keep all your caravans alive, because eventually, once the match goes so far, you're going to make a lot of use of all these caravans. So if you can keep them around, please do it. It's really nice. Then we're going to get blue number 5, Professional Bureaucracy. This one's rather important for the late game because it actually makes all our library text cheaper by about 25%. So as we get later into the game, and you might want to do the red and yellow technologies, now these are going to be significantly cheaper to get now than if we got them at the start of the game, right? And while you're doing all this, you need to research this card, Agiamato scripts. This will allow home city shipments to arrive faster. This is really, really important for this build. This is going to make things go much smoother for you. Before I noticed this card, I used to do it without it, and it was always painful. Now that I use this card, things arrive on time when I actually need them. Which brings me to another situation. So you notice here that I need about 300 export to get 6, but I'm a little bit behind. So how do you resolve that? Once your tradesman is done with the spice stall, you're going to need to make another one out of this caravan here to keep up with your timing, right? And since we have enough coin and food working, this is a pretty easy thing to afford. Alright, so we will do that now and get blue number 6. Now, at this point, if you wanted to know just the basics of Send Up the Egyptian Fast Industrial, this is basically everything you need to know. This is the bare minimum that you need to know. Alright, but many of you might still be wondering, what do I do now that I've effectively set the Fast Industrial in motion? Well, now you need to make a mixture of Bedouins and continue doing villagers where possible. That's going to be your biggest priority. And another thing too, so you're going to do most of your combat using this palace caravan. You're not going to really be using your garrison at all or your cantonment till later. You're rarely ever going to need these if you're doing everything right. And to be frank and beans with you, if you do get to a point where you're going to need this and this, you might be in some serious trouble with your setup, because it means your teammates A couldn't keep up, your opponents were too high seated, the build just didn't do what it was supposed to do. Alright, so what are you supposed to do actually? So typically when you're doing this thing, you're supposed to take this palace caravan and either A, bring it to your enemy's base, or B, bring it to any sort of situation where there's combat needed, right? So, yep, we'll do that. Notice how it has its own bombard attack of about 60, with a bit of splash to it. So it's actually really good against units. And it's really not advised for enemies dealing with this build to ever try to attack the palace caravan directly, because the palace caravan can do way more damage than they can do to it. It's got 5,500 HP as well, so almost as much as a town center. In fact, so you really don't want to mess with this thing. So what do we do now? So typically, looking at this deck that we made, most of your emphasis is on your age 4 and your age 3, right? Now, depending on if you were able to get any experience treasures, if you were able to get a trading post perhaps, which you can sometimes do, depending on how many wood treasures you get, you might want to get Capitulation of Alexandria. Now, what this does is it cuts your French support cards, this one, this one, this one, and this one, the export costs in half. So you don't need as much export to get these now. Because, see, without it, this code will cost 300 export. This will cost 600. This will be 1,200. And this will be 1,400. After we send the capitulation of Alexandria, notice how cheap it gets now. So this is only about 100 now, which is really cheap. It's barely even noticeable. You're going to get this one real easy. This one here goes to 400. Not bad at all, honestly. This goes to 450, barely even bigger. And this one goes to 600. So these are some really cheap, basically virtually normal shipments now. So, yeah. Now, there is only one shipment, at least in my setup, where I don't go with just French, which would be the 11 Tufansi Corps and 2 Dardanelles guns. Why is that? Because the shipment just has a lot of value to it that I'm willing to pay up the 1,400 export for it. Gives you about 11 guard janissaries, so Shadow Tech to Industrial Age, and 2 Great Bombards. And giving your units +1 line of sight. Which, that doesn't really matter, but big thing to note about this, 2 Bombards and 11 Janissaries. It's totally worth it to get it. Sometimes it'll literally win you the game if you get this one. Now, how do you afford that exactly? So, basically what you're going to need to do while you're doing all this is you're going to have to keep making these spice stalls. Very rarely are you going to be able to afford tradesmen, so most of the time you're either using the tradesmen that you started the game with if you're still alive, and you're just using regular villages on. So you need to manage this economy really well, right? So how do we do these shipments correctly once we're in Industrial Age? So typically, you're either going to start with this, or you're going to start with that, all right? So I'll just show you why this is so significant, all right? So let's just say I'm playing a normal game, right? I'm parked in front of his town center. He's just getting into age 2, maybe age 3 at this point, and he's not really prepared. Guess what I get to do? Bada bing, bada boom, right under his town center. Look at this. Look at what I can do. Right, just like that. Do you see that? Wow. That's insane. Like, you can literally do that. You can literally spawn 2 heavy cannons under somebody's town center using this wonderful wagon here. Before some players might even be in age 3 at that point. They might still be in age 2, depending on what's going on with the other players in the match. So that's very significant. Another thing you can do if you're worried about the artillery getting targeted is you can do for Mamluks. So these Mamluks are what we call an assault unit. So they're basically a tanky heavy cavalry. Moreover, they're just almost clone to the Mamluks we see in the Legacy games. They have I would say about 1,500 hit points on these without upgrades. And that's totally fine, you know. They do get Shadow Teched in age 3 and 4 a little bit, so, yeah. Even without those Imperial upgrades applied to them, they're still very good units. And they also come in with about 30% hack armor, so if they got pikemen and musketeers, and they're probably not even going to be veteran upgrade if you do this build right, these Mamluks are going to do a lot of damage, even against, muskets and stuff. But definitely against hand cab, definitely against skirms, definitely against early forms of artillery or siege troopers. So usually you either do Mamluks first and then these, or the opposite, depending on what your situation is. And from there, you got options, right? You can either do Mamluks here for a little bit more cavalry. You can do revolving cannons for a bit more artillery. And let's just make sure we're still doing Bedouins here and keeping up with that sort of thing. And yep, you're going to have to play it by ear, right? You're going to have to make sure you're only making stuff that you need, because you're not going to be able to get these kind of units for a very long time now, right? And eventually, whether you decide to get Capitulation of Alexandria or not, you're probably eventually going to want to go over to some of these technologies here, some of these cards, like the 5 gendarmes and 2 horse artilleries. Yeah, basically this is a really great card because it gives you 5 guard upgraded cuirassiers with all their wonderful stats, and 2 guard upgraded horse artilleries, right? Because remember, these are export units. So what does that mean? That means that they're shadow tech for us, so we don't actually have to upgrade any of these, right? So just looking at how good the shipping is right here, let's just look at it and see how good it is. So these Corsairs have like 44 splash. Well, they have 44 damage with one splash, and then these horse artillery going to be really good for dispatching infantry and being very quick. These units work very fluidly together, by the way. You send like your Mamluks and your mound guns first. These horse artillery and Corsairs are going to work really well with that in general. And then from there, you're probably going to want to just keep doing villagers. Depending on what your game situation is, you might eventually get some sort of an economy going, but it's never determined 100%. You're going to have to do that depending on what your situation is, right? And that's why in my deck, I include this card named Oasis. Oasis allows you to essentially build farms for free. So they don't cost any wood anymore. So whether there's trees around or not, you can always get infinite food. That's really big, especially on desert maps like Sahara, like the Atacama Desert in Chile, that don't have a lot of trees on. This is a life-saving card there. And even if it's not on one of those maps, now you just have to worry about food. You don't have to worry about wood. And why is that important? Because what you're going to want to do eventually is as the match is progressing, if it still hasn't ended yet, here's the next best thing that you can do. You can go to your library caravan and start researching the red technologies. Why is that? Because we're going to need the red technologies to get to Imperial Age. And the reason we want to go to Imperial Age is because guess what you get to do in Imperial Age? You get to ship all these cards we've used all over again, right? So depending on if somebody wants to feed you food, maybe you farm very well, maybe you find some good food treasures or get a bit on the trade route, you can give them a double whammy of all these cards. It's really effective, and it might be necessary for your survival. And in between all that, you're going to get these free Felahins that you can use to raid your enemy with or add to your main army as just an added cavalry force. Since these Felahins are classified as a cavalry unit or a shock unit, which means they're going to be good against like skirmishers, artillery, and in this case villagers too. Just be aware that they're not that durable. They're not really sort of in the same classification as coyote runners, right? They're going to fall a lot quicker. But if your opponent isn't paying attention, notice how they have a really good rate of fire, right? So, like, yeah, let's just say we're coming in here looking for, like, a hunt or something to maybe raid. Yeah, they attack really quickly. They're very good at going in and out of trouble, pretty much, like that. See that? That's mainly how you want to use the Felahins. And by the way, let's just ship that Janissary card right now, just so you can see why it's very significant, pretty much. Yep, 2 bombards, 11 Janissaries. So imagine 2 of these, 4 of these, and possibly 2 or 3 of these, depending on how many of the French cards you send. This is all your artillery. This is like a big blast of artillery that can take down town centers, forts, group factories, whatever you need. It's there for you, right? And if you run out of steam at a point, guess what? Your most important job is going to be get all the red techs and try to go to that lovely Imperial Age, right? Yeah. And what you can do in the meantime as well, depending on how much resources you got, you can start to make some units from your garrison caravan, right? And eventually your cantonment. I wouldn't say you're probably going to want to do a lot, just enough to get by. Because, well, let's just say you're dealing with a lot of cavalry, and you might be able to sneak in a few spearmen to deal with hussars or something to help your ally out. You can do that because these units are very cheap. Right, and they can be a nice asset to all this powerful stuff that you just put on the field pretty much. So this is going to be the next best thing you can do in your meantime while you're waiting for all these red techs to finish up. Just make sure you keep up with them and make sure you're paying attention to your vills, right? If a hunt disappears, move the vills to the next hunt. If you're running out of export, just make a few more spice dolls, and things will get very spicy for you, right? Big time. And in most cases, you're going to want to make sure that you keep up with your Bedouins, not only because they give you more pop, but because in general they will give you a XP reward for making them too, right? That build bounty. So it's really important you do that. And see right there, I was actually able to fend off infantry just with a group of spearmen, which is pretty good. I think I had a little bit of help from the Fellhin, but just to show you that sometimes the cheap units can be useful in this situation as well, depending on what you're looking for. Yep. More idols. You gotta look out for that sort of thing when you're doing this build. And then we're going on to red number 4, is it? Musket Factory. Very good. Yeah, because notice how we're running out of cards. Well, not necessarily, but we're definitely running out of the hardest hitting cards, right? Our next best ones would be this one, and then from there, this, or this, or this. Right, I do put in some escort cards for maneuver, so if we deal with heavy cavalry like Mahouts, Cuirassiers, Honor Guards, Escoltas, we're not completely defenseless against that, because mostly all these wonderful shipments I've been doing here have been around anti-infantry, and anti-building and anti-villager, but you do need a bit of anti-cav. And since you don't have normal musketeers as Egypt, your best next thing is escorts, right? I used to run 24 spearmen, but I found out in situations where the enemy has like grenadiers and stuff that melts really quickly. So it's better just to get some dragoons in there, particularly because these will be much better against heavy cavalry in general. Yeah. Also, I do include a few upgrade cards here too to pay attention to. I include Burfier rifles. This will give Ascaris more multipliers against musketeers, and also increase their damage by 20%. This card here basically will increase multipliers against assault units for the escorts, so your dragoon units. So let's say you're dealing with Escoltas or Cuirassiers, and you're not really doing the type of damage you want out of these shipments. Or maybe you're training some from your cantonment at that point, just send this, and you should be able to deal with the heavy cavalry much better. In the case of musketeers spam, let's say you're dealing with Cap and his line infantry, and you got some Ascaris on the field. This is a great way to make their damage go a lot farther without even getting the guard upgrade on their firearm. It's really good. Also, eventually you're going to want to get Gur's Mace once it gets really late game for your Mamluks to do 20% more damage. And then you're going to want to get Rebellion of Ali Bey. This card will allow you to train Mamluks from your town center caravans. So no longer are you going to need your palace caravans all the time to get Mamluks. If you're dealing with trouble in your base, you can start sending Mamluks out to defend that thing, right? It's quite good. Quite good, actually. And then I have 700 wood here. This is technically a backup. If you need wood for whatever reason, for like Bedouins or an upgrade, just have it there. Basically, so if you need it, you can get it, right? Alright, so where are we at now? We're on red number 5. We're out of coin right now. I'm not paying attention to that. Yeah, you gotta make sure you do that and stay yapping all the time, right? You gotta make sure that you're staying on top of those necessary resources, whether it's the export, the food, or the coin. And yes, sometimes the wood too. I mean, I don't think you're gonna use a lot of wood in this build, except for when you need Bedouins. But yeah, especially the coin, the food, and the export is gonna be really important for you to get, right? So we're on to red number 5, and then you're gonna get red number 6 after that. And after that point, then you're looking pretty good, because now you got the age ups and you're in the age where you can get all your military upgrades. Notice how you could get hardwood spear, you could get turban for your infantry from the garrison pretty much, and your camel riders, so that's always something worth considering. And then you're going to want to keep getting more stuff from there, right? Definitely. I decided to get the economy ones last, but you're more than free to get them if you think you're going to be that deep into the game. Also, if you, at any point you feel like you're having issues getting certain resources during all of this, I would say definitely after you've reached Industrial Age, if you're just dealing with Age 4 and 5, if you're running into any sort of resource issues. Definitely pick up Yellow 1, because Yellow 1 will not only boost up Pasha slightly with his aura for your villagers, but it will also give you a market caravan as well, which normally we would get at the town center, but that's fine. And then you can also start to get your eco upgrades from this thing as well and sort of trade these resources as needed. Yeah, figured I'd point that out as a little tip to you. If you're running low on certain resources, feel free to get Yellow 1 at a time just for that market that you're going to need, right? Yeah, basically. In situations where you think you're definitely going to be going into late game with this thing, I don't think you want to do that. It's going to be really bad and painful and annoying, but if you do, I would include the card that lets you to get olive plantations with your villagers. Yeah, that way you can take about, I believe, 60 of your Egyptian villagers, right, and stick them onto the olive plantations, right. Is it 20, or did they... I think they reduced it back down to 10, but either way, definitely get the olive plantation card if you think you're going to need more late game for Egypt, because I'm going to tell you this much, with all this going on, you don't want wood. The olive plantations are a great way for Egypt to get around needing so much wood. And if you do happen to run into wood, feel free to get the upgrades on them. You know, those olive plantations got a lot of good upgrades. A lot of good upgrades. I think there's like 5 or 6 upgrades on that thing. So go for it. It's really good, you know. I mean, I'm not saying that mining from the quarry is bad. I'm just saying that thing's going to add up over time in costs of coin and wood that you just can't afford. The olive plantations, though, if it ever comes down to it, will be a sustainable eco method for you to have, right? Yeah, definitely. And notice how all these cards are available once again. So if I add pop available, I would be able to ship these once again now that I'm in the Imperial Age. Just important to point that out for you. Yeah, definitely. So hopefully this little guide was good for you. Hopefully you get the main points of it. If you have any questions at all, put them in the comments section. I will answer them. It's a pretty easy build to get going. You know, just again for a refresher. First is first, get the spice doll going. Get any treasures around your periphery. Then villagers on the hunts. Pasha onto his empower ability. Then get all the library blue techs. After that, focus on the shipment part and balancing out your villager and your Bedouin economy. If you run into a late game situation, red library techs are going to be the priority and not yellow. Only get Yellow 1 if you need a market to trade resources around and if your ally doesn't have a good enough eco to support you. Because you can always ask Juanito Amigo for some resources too. Like your sugar daddy or your sugar mama. You know, you don't always have to do it yourself. Just point it out there. If you got a lucky Juanito Muy Fuerte Cappy or something, then yeah, you can definitely call the little ding 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 bell and get that help. So yeah. Hopefully this was a good guide for you. If there's any other guides you want me to do for you, absolutely tell me when we're in lobby or whatever. Or put it on the channel or send me something on Discord and say, hey, I saw this build you did. Could you show me how it's done? And I'll do another one like this anytime. I'm here for you. You know, I'm here to give you these builds because nobody else does them. You know. So yeah, signing off now. See you on the next thing we have, whether it's a cast of game or whatever. See you then.